Beyond the Beach by Jordan Dickerson. All they're going to do is eat the food and complain about their knees, said 16-year-old Caleb as his 5 adolescent peers huddled around him on the moonlit beach. They're going to drag us down quicker than the ship went. Easy for you to say, said Josiah, who was also 16. If your parents had made it onto the life raft, I bet you wouldn't be so quick to leave them. Caleb stared at Josiah, the only sound between them the waves on the beach. Josiah began to regret his words as being too low of a blow, even if they were directed at Caleb. You're right, said Caleb, but since my parents didn't make it off the ship, I'm not blinded by my feelings on my decision here. More like you don't have any feelings, said 15-year-old Elise. I think he has a point, said Robert. You can't be serious, said Elise. Think about it, said 16-year-old Robert. Mom and Dad want to do whatever's best for us, right? Right? Elise just stared back at him, so he continued. Well, this is the best thing for you, me, and Elliot. This is how we survive. But how will we know what to do without the adults? Said 12-year-old Elliot. We should stick with them. You think they have a clue what they're doing? Said Robert. Dad's an accountant. I can figure things out around here just as well as he can. Better, because I'm not old. I'm the one who showed them how to make a fire. If you want to stick with them, fine. But I'm going. If you're going, I'm going, said Elliot. No, you're not, said Elise. If he wants to come, he can come, said Robert, stepping in between them. Delilah, you still need to choose, said Caleb, and you don't have to make the same dumb choice as your brother, so what's it going to be? Are you coming or rotting? 14-year-old Delilah looked from Caleb to Robert, and her gaze lingered there for a moment until Robert noticed her staring. Delilah quickly looked to Josiah and said, I'm going. What? Said Josiah. I'm going with them, said Delilah. Wait, started Josiah. It's settled, interrupted Caleb. Me, Robert, Delilah, and Elliot are going to go off and survive. Josiah and Elise are going to go back to Mommy and Daddy until they starve to death. Delilah isn't going, said Josiah. Yes, I am, replied Delilah. Why do you even want to go? Asked Josiah. This doesn't make any sense. I want to go because it's a good idea, said Delilah. I can think for myself, you know, and that's why I'm going, and you can't do anything to stop me. Then I'm going too, said Josiah. What? Said Delilah. I'm not letting you go off by yourself, said Josiah. If you're going, then I'm going, and you can't do anything to stop me. Wait, said Elise. If Josiah's going, I'm going too. Really? Said Robert. Shut up, said Elise. I'm going, all right. Caleb smirked and said, What are we waiting for? While the adults were still sleeping, the 6 youths took all of the food and water Robert's father had managed to get onto the life raft as the cruise ship was going down. It wasn't much, but if they were conservative about it, they could make it last a week. With the rations in hand, the young group made their way to journey up one of the mountains on the island. The journey required them to trek through mud, stumble through rocks, climb up vines, fight off snakes, and swat away hordes of insects, devouring their flesh. Out of boredom and exhaustion, they ate more food and drank more water than they should have. That was just the first day. At night, the youths were too exhausted to move, but could hardly sleep due to all the sounds from the creatures of the night. The next morning, they ached all over, and Josiah suggested, We should just go back. This isn't worth it. Are you crazy? Said Caleb. Do you really think they'd forgive you for this? Of course they will, said Josiah. "They're our parents." "And you left them to die," said Caleb, and Josiah looked to the ground. Caleb continued, "You abandoned them without a scrap of food left to eat. Blood is only thicker than water when there's plenty around to drink." Caleb looked around at the rest of the group and asked, "Anybody else want to go back?" The group was silent, letting their eyes wander aimlessly, so Caleb said, "Good, let's keep going." Their skin itched, their feet were sore, and their muscles were on fire, but the youths continued up the mountain. On the third day of their journey, the youths reached the top of the mountain and took refuge in a cave, passing out almost as soon as they lay down. When Caleb woke up the next day, he walked out of the cave and soaked in the beautiful sight of the island beneath him. He smiled, letting the moment wash over him. As Caleb continued to gaze upon everything the light touched, he noticed something curious on the horizon. "It's a boat!" shouted Elliot, whom Caleb just noticed was standing next to him. The other members of the youth group awoke and exited the cave as Elliot continued to shout, "A boat! A boat!" "No, it's a ship," said Josiah. "It's headed for the island. We have to get back to the beach." "All the way back?" said Elliot. "I'm still tired, and there's no water left. No food, either." "Suck it up, Buttercup," said Elise. "Do you know when the next boat is going to come by?" "Because I don't." "To no one in particular," Caleb said softly. "We came all this way." "For nothing," said Josiah to Caleb. "I'll make sure to tell everyone it was your idea. Now let's get going." As the youths made their strenuous journey back to the beach, Robert was bitten by a spider, and despite his claim that it's nothing, he died 3 hours later. The youths continued on until Elise, distracted by Elliot crying, was bitten by a snake. Elise lost the ability to move and had trouble breathing. She died after half an hour. With both of his siblings dead, Elliot was more distraught than ever, and the hunger didn't help. While the remaining 4 were climbing down vines, Elliot lost his grip and fell to the bottom, breaking his neck. Caleb, Josiah, and Delilah continued on, but they were hungry and thirsty, and the effects were taking hold. As they stumbled through rocks, Delilah fell, bashing her head on one of them. "She's dead, man," said Caleb. "Leave her." Trying to hold back his tears, Josiah replied, "She's my sister." "I'm not leaving her." Josiah pulled Delilah onto his back like a sack of potatoes, and they continued on. As they trekked through the mud, Caleb was amazed Josiah was still able to carry Delilah's body. Caleb was so thirsty he didn't think he could carry words out of his mouth, let alone a person on his back. He continued to walk and heard a raspy "Help!" come from behind him. Caleb turned around and saw that Josiah was sinking into quicksand. "Help!" Josiah's raspy voice called out again as his hand was outstretched to Caleb. Caleb didn't want Josiah to die, but he was so tired, and the ship wouldn't wait around forever. He thought to himself, "I'll make sure to tell everyone it was your idea." Too exhausted to feel guilt, Caleb turned around and kept walking as he heard one last raspy "Help!" Not knowing how he kept his body going, Caleb finally emerged from the trees onto the beach. He could see in the distance that the ship was sailing away from the island, so he did his best to run towards it, but his leg muscles burned so much he could barely manage more than a hobble. He did his best to wave his arms, but they ached so much he could hardly get them past his chest, and he did his best to yell at the ship, but his mouth was so dry he couldn't hear himself over the waves. Dropping to his knees at the water's edge, Caleb continued to stare out at the ship, leaving him behind, trying to will it to turn around, but it didn't, and once it had disappeared on the setting sun horizon, Caleb looked down the beach and saw 5 crosses made from sticks poking out of the sand.